Welcome to the Fullcaster Podcast, episode 17. Our guest today is Jesus Vasquez, widely known as the man behind P1 Engines, but is also the father to Jesus Vasquez Jr., who also races in the junior ranks as well, and plenty to talk about with that kid and how he's been doing. Oh, we got tons of stuff to talk about with Jesus, but before we get into that, we'll jump into the current events as usual here, bud. Recording this on Monday, September 14th.
Yeah.
And long awaited for me. Has nothing to do with karting whatsoever, but fantasy football. Fantasy football is back.
It is the first Monday back for Monday Night Football.
Monday Night Football tonight.
Yep.
Fantasy football hasn't gone so hot for me.
No.
Right out of the gate.
Has for me.
Yeah, congratulations. The reason why I bring up the fantasy football thing, though, is, I mean, it's a hell of a lot of fun. But we barely got it going on. It was about 2 weeks before the actual season starts.
Yeah.
Like Cameron Jocelyn, he's the commish, right? But we also have people like Travis Lowe, Logan Calvin, several others, Shelby Jocelyn, several others that are in the league. One of the cool things, though, is like this last weekend there was LAKC, which we'll talk about in a bit, but Travis is here. And
so we're all kind of just talking some smack to each other. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And, I'm joking about different
It's
things.
actually more just us talking smack to Travis because he doesn't talk shit.
No,
really.
he's a nice guy. I don't know how he slots into that whole role, but
no.
So fantasy football is a hell of a lot of fun. Kind of picking your team and looking at the different players and whatnot. And actually, I bet we could, if there's other people out there that actually enjoy doing it, we could probably have more leagues next year. We barely got this one going with Cameron, but I think it'd be fun if there's anybody else that wants to do it, and we do other fantasy football leagues.
There would easily be another Cal Speed league we can throw together.
That would be fun. But
that's a good time.
Yeah, no, it's a good time for sure. And one of the reasons I bring that up, right, is that the bust that was the fantasy football karting league that I was trying to do, with the way COVID stuff happened and whatnot. I'd be curious if people actually cared about that. I think it's a fun idea, but let's see what happens with that. But regardless of the fantasy stuff and whatnot, we'll end up poking about this as the season goes on. I mean, this is Monday Night Football tonight, so it's the end of the first week.
Yeah.
And I'm sure as we record more of these, we've only got a couple more recordings to do before the end of the season here. 2 or 3 more? Yeah, we're going to cap this thing about 20 or so episodes. Still going to try to do an on location, but
we'll see where the location's
little
at.
Pokes, especially if we have a recording the same week that you and I go against each other in the league. That'd be kind of fun.
That'd be nice.
Anyways, back to the away from the fantasy stuff though, and back to there's plenty of real racing going on, regardless of fantasy karting or fantasy football or like that. In fact, we just had the LAKC round number, was it 4? Where are we at?
I think
so.
Yeah.
I think it's 4. LAKC this last weekend. You got a chance to go play again. We were on Classico Counter. And how'd that go?
Good as I can go, I guess.
You didn't get wrecked out this time.
No. I would never name names, but I mean, without having a Yesnik out there, that helps. that helps my lifespan go up.
Yeah. Although there was plenty of shenanigans in that class.
Oh my god, dude! Freaking kids. Man. The senior category.
There's
no fear, and I think with that comes no eyesight because everyone was running into each other.
It seems to be like in the senior category, no matter how you scratch it. And it's not a dig. It's just saying that there's the need to or want to go for whether there's a hole there or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, is
definitely up there.
Well, I just threw him under the bus, but yeah, Jacob and I had the run-in at the previous round, but stuff happens. I'm not going to dwell on it or anything. I am going to give him a hard time about it when I see him at sign-in, though. But anyways, no, I mean, it's part of racing. But, I think from that last round and seeing a lot of the stuff happen around me this round, I was after seeing how their heat race went in the start of the main, I'm like, all right, the mentality here is just don't get wrecked.
Man.
And that really came down to it because I think at the end of it, there are 4 or 5 carts that DNF'd.
Yeah, there was actually a lot sitting on the sidelines this time. And we were going in the counterclockwise direction, so you're going down to the S's. There was an issue at the start of the heat. Mm-hmm. The main, I thought you guys were all right. But turn 1's always going to be a bit challenging. And you got a kind of a 90-ish right in forward, and then you got the S's here, so it's either direction's going to be a bit tight.
Yeah, the 90 right coming up the hill isn't nearly as bad because you get a little bit more room on the outside, so you can adapt to some stuff going on. But the S is kind of a roller coaster, pretty much one lane through there, and it's really one lane if the guys around you aren't playing nice.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, and a quick shout out to Casey Gillis, who went for a bit of a ride in the main.
Yeah.
Flying across through some barriers and whatnot. Looked like he was all right. Kind of got a few scratches, a few bumps and bruises, but
he was walking around in their tent talking smack to us. Yeah. No, he wasn't. No, he was walking around. He was okay.
I was gonna say Casey Gillis talking smack.
No, talking.
This guy was gonna say get him to
He's
smile.
A quiet kid. Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, I mean, like you said, you just went racing, plenty of racing going on, and one of the cats doing plenty of just that and working in the industry is our guest today. So, without further ado, let's go and bring on Jesus Vasquez. Jesus, thanks for coming down, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
And we were just talking in the current events. Had another race this weekend at LAKC, and I mean, aside from I didn't even think about the current events, but freaking fires lately and the amount of smoke and just the haze was pretty ridiculous.
Yes.
I was actually just pops in my head on Saturday. We were noticing that as the day went on, it actually got worse as the wind started bringing it more in.
Mm-hmm. Real bad.
Yeah, and actually, I was thinking about it then, and knowing that we were going to record it, I want to ask you, does any of that kind of crap affect the engine performance? I mean, we're going to get into what you do and whatnot in a second, but it just popped in my head.
I would imagine. I mean, the air's worse.
You don't get a ton of testing time in it, though.
You don't pump a bunch of campfire smoke in there as you're doing your dyno work?
It honestly didn't seem to affect the tuning.
Yeah.
You know? Our shop's pretty close to the track, so the stuff we run on the dyno, it doesn't seem to change much from the time we come here.
Right.
You know, but no, I didn't.
Gotcha. Yeah, I just had to ask that. So speaking of engines and whatnot, we talked about in the opener here that, P1 engines is your deal, but tell us a bit more about the old day job and how that whole thing got going.
Well, it's a pretty long story.
We got time.
I've told it many times, so I'll shorten it up to the good stuff, but it basically started in 96, you know. My parents live very close to Adams Kart track.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, the property next to my parents' house is owned by one of Troy's uncles, Jerry. And the house next door was a rental. They had that property. They would rent it out. And at one point, Troy moved in.
Oh. Huh.
And that's where it started. Again, it's a long story, but it's Troy's very in and out. So at one point, his grass is pretty much waist high. Me and my brother, I have an older brother, 2 years older. We're doing our lawn, and he looks over the fence and says, "Hey, you guys want to make some money and help me cut the grass?" And I said, my brother, I looked to my brother because he's older. I'm 15 at the time. He says, "Yeah, let's do it. Let's help him out. We'll make some money." My brother, I think at the time is a junior. No, he's a senior. So he's looking to make some extra money.
Yeah.
So we go over. We help him cut the grass. No problem. Troy says, "Hey, come over tomorrow. I'll have some cash and I'll pay you guys." So I said, okay. So being the younger brother, my brother, he says he sends me. He goes, "Go get our money." So I go, okay, great. So I go over, knock on Troy's door. He's like, "Yeah, come in." Goes to the back, brings out some money and says, "Hey, as a matter of fact, I run the track down here at Adams. Would you guys be interested in doing some work?" We were kind of doing some buildings at the time. They didn't have the building in the front.
Right.
They were going to do some work to it. So I'm like, the truth is I didn't care too much about it. I'm a sophomore in high school. I'm like, give me my money.
Yeah.
Peace out.
I'll let the brother know he's the one who wants the extra cash.
As a matter of fact, I wasn't even going to tell my brother.
Oh.
So I go over and give my brother the money, and he kind of gets excited. And I'm like, I go, "Well, hey, he mentioned he had more work for us if we wanted to go work at the track." So my brother jumps on it. He's like, "Yes, let's do it." So I'm like, okay. So he sends me back, go tell him. So I go, "Hey, Troy, we want to," my brother says yes. He's like, "Okay, we'll come report, down here over the weekend." And that's where it originated. So we start going, me and my brother. And I kind of got fascinated by the whole thing. And
so you guys are going there. You're working out at the kart track, working on whatever odd projects, and there's obviously karts and stuff going around.
Yeah,
right?
there's karts, but at the beginning it was more. He was putting in these buildings,
Okay.
you know, the trailers,
Yeah.
and we were ripping out carpets for him. You know,
Okay.
digging trenches for wire or whatever, plumbing,
all right.
and just
Doing
you
some
know,
renos, huh?
Yeah, just doing
Okay.
reno for him, and he was paying us, and it was good. And then later transitioned into he had a karting school, so he says, "Hey, can you guys work on these karts?" So me and my brother grew up. My dad being his career was a trash truck driver,
Okay.
but from the time he left that work, you know, when he'd come home, he worked on cars.
All right.
He worked on changing engines. He did body work. He did everything.
Is that like a hobby or whatnot? Or?
No, I mean, he just did it really for us to survive. I mean, he
Okay.
wasn't making a lot of money doing the trash truck driving,
Okay.
you know, and he's got 3 kids, and they had bought the house that they own now, and he's just making extra money, you know, and sending it. And some of it, like a lot of the Hispanic families, they send some of it back home,
Okay.
right? So he just was into always staying busy, working on painting cars. So me and my brother grew around bikes, dirt bikes, just kind of knowing tools, which later on when Troy puts his go-kart in front of us and says, "Hey, can you guys do this and that?" And we're like, "Yeah, I mean, this needs this wrench, this needs that." We started getting hands-on.
The baseline was already there.
Yeah, so after a few months, my brother's like, he's actually getting close to graduating high school. He's like, "Not for me." But I hung in there. It turned out like, man, I liked it. I was, you know, had really nothing else to do around my neighborhood. You know, we didn't, you know, I tried playing some sports. I played soccer for a little bit, but it basically came down to I didn't have a ride to go to practice
Oh, wow.
Gotcha.
because my dad worked full time. They're very old school. My mom's at home doing the housework. She didn't drive, didn't have a car. So when I'm home from school, I'm pretty much stuck there.
Right.
But there's
So
a kart track not too
There's
far
a kart
down.
track
Yeah.
that I could ride my bike to.
There you
so
go.
that just became get home from school, ride down to the track, whatever Troy needed me for. You know, I worked. Eventually rolled into, we traded. One day he says, "Hey, you want to drive?" I go, "Yeah, I want to drive, man. You've been having me work on these things.
Yeah.
I've been, you know, seeing him whiz by. I was teaching him. He was having me, they had a really nice school, beginners, and, you know, I was the guy putting chain lube on. I would be a corner worker at Tri-C was Adams. We had Tri-C, we had SoCal Sprinters, and there was another club called Sundowners.
Sundowners. That's the first
Yeah.
time I've
First
heard of
we've
that
heard
one.
of that.
Yeah, so there was a club that would come around. Tri-C ran the sweeper at Adams. SoCal ran the S's, the original track, and Sundowners would come and run backwards.
Huh.
And then because it was a popular track at the time, we had IKF Region 7, and they would usually host 2 events there. And so racing was just busy at Adams at the time.
Right.
Cal Speed hadn't come around, Moran hadn't come around, and so I would work the corners. I'd work, you know, just whatever. So anyways, one day he says, "You want to drive?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely." He says, "Okay." Get out in the go-kart, put the suit on. I remember, and I'm just get out there.
How old are you at that time?
I'm 15. This is 96.
So this is all within that first year of you
Yes.
mowing the lawn for him and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
This was I was April 96.
Wow.
And so I get in the cart, you know, and it's like the adrenaline. I mean, number one, it feels like you're going 200 miles an hour.
Right.
Yeah.
Low to the ground. I mean, I grew up again like on the dirt bikes and quads, so I had a little bit of like speed and, you know, how to corner, but I, you know, very more than like a basic person, but like, you know. So then he comes later in the office, he goes, "Hey, did you like it?" I go, "Yes." He goes, "How, you know, that stuff costs money." I'm like, "Yeah, I know, right? It's not, you know, I get it." He goes, "But how about we trade? You drive every now and then, and at the end of the week, we kind of figure out, you know, you worked X amount of hours, and then you drove X amount of hours." And it became at first where I would drive a little and I would still make some money. Then it became where it was a wash. It's like you're not getting paid.
You're
Yeah.
starting to bank up.
And then became where it was on my side where I'm like, I kind of owe him.
I owe him some weekends here.
Yeah. And so I just love doing it, really, the driving.
Did you take to it pretty quick?
I did, but it was because I was around constantly with the school. And so
You just picked up stuff from the school naturally.
yeah, I mean, I was around. They would do the track walks eventually to where I started teaching the little kids, and then just teaching them basics. And then it got to a point where I was miserable doing it. I didn't like it. And then I got to a point where I changed my whole train of thought. And it became more of a competition to myself of like, how can I take this person that knows nothing about karting and actually get him to go around the track at a decent pace?
So the part that you didn't like was you didn't like the coaching, is what you're saying? That was before you changed the mindset. You're kind of like, oh man, this guy's terrible. I don't want to teach him.
The truth was, you've met my son, and it does come from me. I was very quiet.
Okay.
I didn't talk a lot. All those things kind of made me nervous. They didn't, I just didn't like it.
Right.
So when you would teach a class, you had to, this whole thing of getting in front of people.
Okay.
And
For sure. Get past all that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was,
I got you.
didn't
So
like
you basically had this kind of, and like I've said it with other people, I've got this social anxiety issue. Like at the track, I'm all good. I leave the track, man, and I'm like reserved, and I'm not talking to anybody. I'm just not comfortable. I'm not confident in that stuff, right? So it's kind of the same thing you think about when you're a kid, right? I wasn't going out and making new friends and whatnot and be kind of thrust into that deal, especially until you get really confident in knowing what the heck you're talking about.
That's right.
It like shit, man. Even when I first started working here, I didn't want to. I had to go when I first started. It was clipboards and cash for the most part. So you had to go out there, and I had to go to everybody's tent and get them signed in.
Yeah, face to face.
I hated it so much,
Right.
and I remember having it. Like there was a time where I had to go into their tent and get them. Oh man, my anxiety's through the roof. But then I was here longer, right, and I got more confident, and blah blah blah, and one thing after another. So that's awesome. I mean, I actually think that's one of the things as a kid that if you can get over that hump, and it sounds like you figured out how to do it by competition with yourself. Well,
yeah. I mean, eventually, so I got to be pretty good. I got a lot of seat time. That's what people don't understand even nowadays. I drove so much. One of the things when you teach the school, we would set the carts up that morning. Somebody has to drive them to make sure the brakes work, to make sure everything is good.
Shake them
and
down.
so I would jump in the seat, take all the carts out. The school would end. I would drive some more, right? Everything's there. When it would rain, we would have days that it would rain and we would have to cancel. We would have to set everything up just in the chance that it would stop raining.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Because the whole idea was you scheduled the class. We want to do it. Mm-hmm. It's going to cost us more money to come back. They're not going to pay any more money. It gets postponed. So we would have to set everything up. And then a lot of times the rain wouldn't stop, but the carts were out. I would drive in the rain.
Oh, okay.
And I just got seat time. I mean, it was to a point where I just drove all the time, and I say to Troy, hey, I'm pretty good now, man.
How long was that before you've had that conversation? How long you been driving?
That was like through the summer of '96. I mean,
wow.
I'm just driving all the time, every day. I mean, we would teach schools on the weekends. We would teach schools on the weekdays.
And then you're around all the races too.
Yes.
So you kind of get a gauge on how things work and can see
I'm in the
passing
corner
happen.
worker.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I remember telling Troy's dad, Tim, we're sitting at the big Mons. I'm like, I don't understand how they're going so fast through this corner. And, he's like, oh, you'll get there. And I'm like, okay. Anyways, we just doing the teaching, the driving. I said, Troy, I'm good now. He said, okay, get your cart, get me a cart set up. I'll meet you down there Tuesday afternoon, and I'll drive with you.
Nice.
Of course, he gets in the cart. He takes off. I'm like, okay, I'm not that good. It's like, well, you can't keep up to me yet,
a wake-up call.
Yeah. He's like, hey, you need to work on this. You need to work on that. I'm like, okay.
The first bit of coaching.
Yes. And again, I listen to him when he's teaching. I'm picking it up. I'm I'm learning, and just little by little got better. We're enough to where he says, okay, you're ready for your first race. Puts me in a race. And that was fun. Some of the early races we would do were in Saugus, is where LAKC originated from. Actually, I don't know if it originated there, but that's at the time in the 90s, we would drive to Saugus Speedway, and that's where I first met the Los Angeles Kart Club. Not even sure if it was called that at the time, but that's where it ended up coming from there to Irwindale and then making its way over here.
Right.
Eventually just started winning some club races, started doing well.
Sorry, was your first race not at Adams then?
I think it was.
Okay.
Those days are a little blurred because I drove so much and
Right.
ended up racing so much. It basically came down to when there was a club race, I was a filler.
Oh.
So Troy at one time was the president of Tri-C, or he ran the club or was heavily involved in one of the clubs. And I remember if the entries were a little light, he'd call on me and Steven.
Oh, cool.
Oh, wow.
He'd say,
That's
hey,
awesome.
go get your go-karts. You guys are racing today.
Instead of working or doing a little bit of both?
Kind of both. I
Yeah.
mean, we would corner work, and then we would jump in the carts, and we would get to race in the back of the field and the mid, and then eventually made our way up to the front. I mean, I remember those days of racing Lloyd Mack Jr. You know, me, Lloyd, Steven, we're out there racing in these Margays, you know.
Well, so you're 15. We're all about real close to the same age then, I think. I'm 38, almost 39. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'll be 40 in November.
40 in November. So, yeah, and then Matt Johnson's right around that same age, right? And then
Yeah.
Steven. That's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
What was that first kart you drove? Do you remember the motor on it?
Yamahas.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's all there was, Yamahas.
So, and are you jumping into, is it senior yet for you? Or are you able to do junior still?
I think I might have done one junior race, but I was a little bit bigger. So immediately I remember doing senior.
Man, you're going to the deep end of the pool there, aren't you?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But at the time, that's what people don't understand nowadays. I tell them, you know, we raced a Yamaha with a 3-hole can at 350 pounds. And what that's equivalent to is putting a mini Swift with the only difference is the power of a mini Swift with the clutch that you can slip, which would help you off the corner. Mm-hmm. But that's the amount of power we had at 350 pounds. So this is very slow.
So you're saying that we should probably up the weight in mini is what you're saying.
No. I generally think karting is too fast nowadays.
Too fast.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think generally that's our biggest problem. In the old days, we had this system where you started very slow, even from the ground up. I mean, the cadets was a slower class, and you worked your way up to the faster cars. And when the kids got there, they were much better drivers.
They knew how to race, be around other people.
Yeah, and just not too long ago, I mean, the introductory to karting was an X30. That's all we had.
That's true.
And then the 206 came out. That was a big, we saw it was like many more people were coming out. Mm-hmm. The KA has been the
next step up.
The next step to where now the X30 guys came back and they're like, wow, this is funner, easier, cheaper, way better.
Right.
I think the clubs really need to look into a sportsman division of the KA. Because right now, even now, you have a lot of the X30s. I mean, you have Drew come down to the KA. He doesn't really belong there.
He's pretty damn good, that driver.
There's not a pro class for him to race. I mean, there is, but there's no entries.
Sure.
And there's a few guys that belong in that KA class, but there's a lot of guys that are getting into the sport, and it's a little bit discouraging when they're a second or 2 seconds off.
Sure.
So I really think there's room for a sportsman class to say, hey, we used to have a sportsman class in the old days, and it was for anybody that was their first 2 years in karting. They could only run that class. And most guys only ran it for one, right, if they really were into it. Mm-hmm. But there was a place for those guys to go and get good and, you know, the
not
chance
get discouraged.
and the chance to get on the podium.
Kind of like the old PRD pilot program that LAKC had going there for a bit. I mean, Dirk, you ran it for a couple of years.
That was nice because I remember the...
And then he had PRD Senior, which, you know, the big dogs are running.
Yeah, I mean, I was in pilot, but I'm looking at senior. I'm like Molinotti's in it. I'm like, these are some heavy hitters in that class.
The problem with that was the package, the engine.
Yeah,
it ended
sure.
up being a problem.
But kind of to your point, though, is that that's the right idea.
yes,
Have that kind of split. I'm sure we'll end up talking about that some more. I want to go back to those early days. So you start doing the club racing and whatnot, and doing some races. But you said going to Saugus. This is all at the end of '96 there on the other side of summer, or are we going into '97 at all?
Yeah, so 96. So before I leave out the important part of the story is I'm in high school. I'm doing terrible. I mean, I have parents that didn't went to grade school. You know, that's just how they came from. And
sorry, did they come from Mexico here?
yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, they came over in 1980 and bought the house the year I was born.
Oh.
And so their education, their biggest thing coming up was they didn't put a whole lot of effort in my education. They just really were concerned. We grew up in a rough area, you know, and they were just happy that I wasn't getting in trouble and I wasn't doing any kind of drugs.
Sure.
Right.
So the great things were kind of like a back burner. They weren't too, as long as I was going to school,
Yeah.
you know, and so,
Right.
but here comes Troy, and Troy says, "You want to race?" He says, I go, "Yes." Now, Troy, a little bit of Troy, he went to the same high school I did, but I was on the opposite end. He was Mr. President, you know, of his class. He was Mr. Involved.
Yeah.
And I'm the guy, like, you don't even hear about me.
Joy doesn't strike me as a very old guy.
He's about 10 years older than me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when he was having that conversation with you about the lawn and whatnot, I mean, he's only in his mid-20s at the time.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he says to me, "You want to race?" I said, "Yes. Yes, I do." He goes, "Okay. How are your grades?" I'm like, "Oh, boy.
Yeah. You had to bring up the
Terrible."
grades.
He goes, "You got to get C average," because I wasn't at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, "Okay, C average." By this point, I'm hooked.
Yeah.
So I go to school. No problem.
Nice.
All I had to do was pay attention.
All right.
You know, so I said, "Okay." I go, "Here's my report card." He goes, "Okay, let's go racing."
That's
That's
awesome.
so cool.
And, you know, you can fast forward a little bit, but later on, I start dominating or doing real well in the club level, and he takes me to a regional race, which at that time is probably a good pro kart challenge race. Like
Okay.
a good level. "Do you want to race here?" I go, "Yes." He goes, "Okay."
And this is in senior?
This is in senior.
Okay.
Yeah, so he goes, "You want to do some travel races? You got to get B average."
I love this. That's awesome.
No problem, Troy. Just had to work a little harder. Came back. Here are my Bs.
Yeah.
So that's how kind of it got going. So as I start getting better, it helps him out because now I'm winning races. We have a school. I become the head instructor. It helps him advertise the school. Hey, you can get taught by this guy here that's winning the races. So it became, for him, business too. It was a good way of him making more sales, right? I got to race. So then we kind of then later on brokered a little bit more and saying, hey, you know, I need to make some money.
Right.
And then because now you're using me as a tool and it's helping both of us, I get to race, I get to learn, I get to teach this back to the kids. We
Drive business up. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like, okay. I was at Adams from 96. So the end of 96, there's this big race. They used to do this California State Championship
Right.
every year at Adams, Thanksgiving weekend. This was like the Super Nats at the time.
Okay.
You get all the guys from Phoenix, you know, all these guys come out from up north. I mean, you had Joey Hand, you had Buddy Rice, you had all these guys coming. Adams couldn't fit any more people.
Right.
And at that time, it's pretty packed because we didn't have these huge trailers that they have nowadays. It was more mom and pops, you know, trailers. So the pits were full. Because I want you to race the California State Championship. I'm like, oh man, I'm nervous.
And you had already done the IKF race at this point?
No,
Okay.
the state championship is going to be the first big race.
But it's local. You're not traveling for this one, so.
Right, it's home track, and
Well, and kind of like now, I would, from hearing everyone else's story around your age group, Cal Speed is a home track to a lot of really fast drivers. Sounds like Adam was too. Adams was
Well,
too,
yeah,
right?
that was the place. You had Paris, but Paris was a smaller track. They added to it.
Okay.
So Paris before was 3 lefts and a right.
Oh, wow. I
was
didn't know
it.
it was that
Yeah,
short.
it was just the whole other section they added. So it wasn't, besides that, that was it. Adams was the place.
Okay.
The carts weren't as wide. They weren't as fast. So it fit Adams,
Right.
and
So this Cal State Championship is getting ready to go off, and you get this chance to go race.
I'm so nervous. I'm practicing. I'm fast. I'm so nervous. I leave the track. I jump on my dirt bike. And the old days, I mean, growing up, I talked to my parents. I'm like, what were you guys thinking? I used to jump on my dirt bike, no helmet, shorts, T-shirt,
Yeah.
no cell phone,
No fear, too.
just right up to the hill,
What's the worst that could happen?
right. And long story, I ate it pretty bad. I scratched up my whole back
Oh, man.
because I'm just nervous. I got to get these nerves. I'm like, I'm going to go tear some dirt up.
Right.
I try to hide it from Troy. I go back the next day and I'm pulling my suit off and I'm like, it's hard.
hurts.
It's like just drying up,
Yeah.
and
man.
it's like, he's like, what happened? And I tell him, and he's like, I think he might have come over to the house and told my parents, no more dirt bike, no more. If you're going to drive, you can't be out there getting hurt. I'm like, I understand. And, we won that race in 96.
You won the
Wow.
Cal State Championship?
Yeah.
Wow. You went
Yeah.
from not even seeing a go-kart to winning that race in
Yeah.
6 months?
Yes.
That's awesome.
In the Stephen Clark episode, he said he was talking about you a little bit.
He was a big part.
And Stephen goes, yeah, I said some stuff about you and whatnot. He goes, hey, Zeus, man, he was a bad man.
Yeah,
he
yeah.
was good.
That's
he was
right.
super good. This is incredible.
Yeah.
That is
Steven was very good also. He took a different path when he gets to high school. He starts playing football.
Okay.
And the thing people don't know about Steven either is he can run. It's disappointing because the kid he was Olympic material. This kid could run.
Wow.
Steven could run without training.
Wow.
And we would always tell him, but he just didn't like it.
Yeah.
And and that when he went to football, that's where it excelled. He could run.
Got it.
And so he went the football route. I stayed on the go-karting side, but me and him had many battles. We would drive till the sun came down.
That's
ran
awesome.
out of gas. I mean, it was
Both
a lot
working there at Adams, right?
Yeah. And so eventually around 2002 now, I'm working. I've learned a lot of different aspects of, which was neat working at the track because they had a parts room. They had a shop in the back. So we would service the go-karts. We would service customer go-karts. We would have a parts department. I did everything from cut the grass at Adams, fix sprinklers, paint the curbs,
Right.
fencing, to work the concession stand, to work registration, parts room, order parts, head instructor. You name it.
Dude, I'll tell you what, that's been the neatest part about working here is the amount of stuff that you learn at a kart track.
Yes.
And because it sounds like same thing at Adams, you try to keep everything in-house. It's cheaper. You guys know how to do it, all that kind of stuff. But, I've learned how to do a little bit of electrical, but I've learned how to do some plumbing stuff, repair.
Still hasn't figured out how to cut grass here, though.
No, yeah. I can't imagine why. But yeah, that's been the neatest part there's that sense of pride, but it's also cool seeing how much of a hand you have with just watching the track to building it, if you will.
Yeah,
right.
So it's pretty cool.
I go to the Nationals in 2001. They were in Iowa.
Is it still IKF? Or
This is IKF IKF Nationals in Iowa. It's a pretty big deal.
We're jumping ahead here.
We're jumping ahead
about
because
5 years.
I worked at Adams, and it got to a point where, for the first thing that happened was I knew how to rebuild everything but the engine.
Okay.
I got really good with the go-kart. I got really good with the driving. The carburetors I had got into. There was a lot more clutch work back then. I had got into the clutch, but the engine was just like an unknown. I went to the Nationals in 01, and for the first time, I felt that I got beat on power. and it felt like there was nothing I can do. I'm just like, I
driving your ass off,
Yeah.
and there's just nothing there.
and
That's
I
all there is,
tried-
yeah.
and at that moment, I wanted to come back and get into the engines. I said, Troy, I think we can open these up and,
This is still the Yamaha stuff at the time?
still Yamaha. And that's kind of where the engine side kind of started. But at the same time, I'd gotten to a point where now I graduated. This is '02, so now I'm 22. I'm going to college. I started at RCC, later on transferred to Cal Poly Pomona for mechanical engineering. But at the same time, I ran into a point where I wanted to make a little bit of money. I'm like, Troy, I'm really working my butt off. Yes, I'm racing, but that's kind of helping the business, but I'm not making any money. I got
Still
school
living
to
at
pay
home?
for. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you had that going for you at least. You're able to do that. You got school, right? That's not free. But
Right.
you didn't have some of the other things going on.
Right.
Gotcha.
Right. But at this age, you kind of want your own
Sure,
place. You want,
absolutely.
but I'm like, there's no chance. I got no money. So we need to start looking at different ways of making some money. And so right at that moment, I met we actually had already met them. The family, the Martinez's, come through our track. They're the owners of King Taco restaurants
Right.
in LA. They're very much into racing. It's two main brothers that had kids that were into racing. One had Raquel, the other brother had Luis Jr. I had already given them instruction. I was already helping them, coaching them. Got to meet them that way. They would do privates with me and so on. One day, the one brother comes to me and says, hey, if there was an opportunity for you to leave the track, would you leave, like as in work? Because I became part of the Adams family. I was family. I am family. Troy is my big brother, uncle, whatever you want to call him.
Right.
So these guys, so it's like they wanted to make sure they could pull me from there and not have like, any issues. And I
Sure.
said,
Yeah.
no, I think it's okay. I think it's fine. I'll talk to Troy. And the Adams family was more than happy. They're like, no, we want to see you succeed. Like, this is the next step. And he took me and basically says, hey, I want to run. My son now wants to race. We've been racing, but he wants to race now, like serious. We have the finances. I want to do it right. I want to have somebody to coach him, to take care of everything. It didn't really make sense to me because I'm like, okay, well, how, we can schedule it. I do the track. And he goes, no. I want you full time.
Wow.
And I said, well, what do you mean full time? I go, I'm used to working on 15 school karts, doing all these different things. They only own 2 go-karts and 3 engines at the time. He goes, yeah, I want you to work on him full time. And I'm like,
And you're still doing school at this time, college and whatnot.
yes. So he gives me an offer. He makes me an offer. It was the whole napkin thing.
Yeah.
We met at a Wendy's, and he says, hey, he had asked me some things about how much I was getting paid, how much I was making, so on. He's like, okay, I have an offer for you. I'm like, okay. Flips the napkin over, and it's like double my salary. He'll pay for half of my school.
Wow.
He's paying for, I'll have a company vehicle. Health insurance. I'm like,
Blowing you away with this.
where do I sign?
Yeah.
He goes, look, go back to Troy, go talk to them. Want to make sure everything's good, think about it. No,
But that's so cool. He's not just yanking you. He's want to make
No,
sure
yeah.
it's being done right.
absolutely. So I run back and I tell Troy, and they were excited as I was, which made me feel good.
Absolutely.
At some point I felt like, man, they're going to be bummed because one of their main guys is leaving. They're not going to want to let him go. No, they were like, this is it. This is your, So that's where I transitioned from the track to now working for the Martinez. We have a shop in Baldwin Park. And I'm working at the time, full-time to him meant it was 25 hours a week. He says you can work 5 hours a day for 5 days, or you can come and work 10 hours and, you could do just 25 hours. Mm-hmm. Get the stuff ready, whatever you need. The first year was a little tricky because I don't really know what the finances are. I'm not sure what the budget is. I'm not sure what this is all new to me.
Yeah.
Right. You're essentially running the team at this point.
Yeah, he wants me. This is now, and one of the things that caught my attention was, I want you to build our engines. And I had just kind of got my foot in the door on that.
Just started doing it.
Yeah, rewind a little bit when I asked Troy, when I told him about wanting to build engines. Well, we know Ed Irving, which is Travis's grandpa.
Okay.
And he says Ed at the time was kind of retired, but still doing some engines. Mm-hmm. And Troy, we make that connection, and I'm driving over to Irving's place, and he's got this little shop in the back, and he's teaching me how to build a Comer.
Wow.
And so that's how I came back and started kind of messing with some engines, and that was about the same time that Luis hit me up, and he says, I want you to build our engines. You're going to be his driver coach. You're going to be the shop manager. You're going to be
full meal deal.
Everything. We'll have a van when you go practice. You put the cart in the van, you go pick up my kid, you take him to the track, you do practice, you take him home. The dad was very hands-off.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you're a 22-year-old kid yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And so...
And I'm sorry, how is the driver?
The driver is 12.
Holy shnikes.
Yeah. Right, going from cadet to junior. And
you caught him at the perfect age then, just to take over.
And so it was a whole learning experience, and...
Did you feel like you kind of bit off more than you could chew at one point? Were you nervous or anything?
Obviously, the offer was really good, but then,
yeah.
Wow, you got to do a lot of stuff.
There was a moment where we were at a race early on, and this is where you start to get some real-life experiences, you know? I mean, this is like, we're at a race, the kid's struggling, you know, and we go in the trailer, and I'm in the back of the trailer, and the dad very rarely got involved. But he pulls the kid over to the side and starts kind of not ripping into him, but questioning him, you know, what's going on. And he says, if Jesus isn't working out, you know, he's gone. You know,
right.
I mean, we don't have to go down that route. And I'm sitting back there like,
oh, buddy.
Say yes, say yes. Say you know, no, say no. You know, he's not the problem.
Right.
And so, you know, the kid says, no. And so it was like, wow. You know, I'm like...
But that was the reality check of this could come and go pretty quickly.
What was interesting is he really saw something in me, because at the time his brother was racing his daughter, and they had full-blown, like, Vulture engines. And I remember being in rooms with them, and the brother, Raul, would say, hey, just buy your kid a Vulture. He goes, why are you... He goes, no disrespect to Jesus, but I mean... These things are fast. Just get him a fast engine. And Luis says, no, we're going to be just fine. And he kind of let me work and develop from the ground up. In the old days, it was known because a Yamaha engine was fairly cheap. So, I mean, it happens nowadays. People buy 20 of them, 10 of them.
Sure, yeah.
The only difference is back then you really needed to do that because the Yamahas were very inconsistent. So you could buy 10
Pick and choose the parts.
2 bullets that were a second to 2 seconds faster than the rest of them.
Wow.
Even if they were all worked the same.
Jeez.
And that's before anybody touches them. That's just out of the gate.
Yeah, it was mainly the cylinder because they were cast. So the castings were a lot of differences. Nowadays, the new cylinders are all CNC machine, which has improved that big time.
The margin's a lot tighter.
Way tighter. The old days, they were cast. The ports could land in your favor.
Wow.
So you would have to buy.
I bet tech was fun back then.
Yeah, so Luis, so on any given race day, there would be a team or a driver, and they would have 5 Yamahas, brand new, first sale. Like these were we knew they were the ones we don't want.
Sure.
And Luis would say, "Hey, how much do you want for these?" And $2,000 each. You know, let's say there was 3. He's like, "I'll give you $3,000 cash right now." No. Later, the guy, hey, man, come back. You know, he would negotiate with these guys. But at the end of the weekend, no one had bought any of them.
Yeah.
So he says, okay, I'll give you $4,000 for all of them. You know, here's the money. And they're, okay, just take them. Right? So then he'd come back to our pit and goes, hey, Jesus, I got more engines for you to play with now. So I would take these and look and learn and a lot of, and just start messing with stuff. And
So how so that that first year it's you running the program, doing the chassis, doing the motors, the whole gig. Were you feeling pretty confident with the motors? As obviously you got more comfortable as time went on that year, but how involved was Eddie with your training at the point? Did it
not
continue for
anymore. I
long?
mean, he helped me a few times. I remember going over there a few times, and then when I left the track, that we ended up. What ended up happening was we actually bought a lot of his equipment. I don't remember his dyno. Ed finally says, "I'm done. I'm out of this. We need to stop." And so I remember at some point being over at his place and picking up a lot of his tooling. So that was kind of like the jump start.
Gotcha.
But that went over not to the track, but it went over to my place.
Mm-hmm. To Derek's point, I mean that time when that kind of moment, that learning moment, where hey, if Jesus isn't working out, was that a little bit about engines at that point? Because hence the conversations you're saying, why just buy a Vulture? Were you guys a little down on power as you were starting to learn how to get through things?
It was hard to say because since I had the teaching background, I knew the kid was lacking a lot on his driving. So and you could see it. I mean, the dad was very reasonable when it came to those kind of things. As you'll learn later on, I mean, his dad, a lot of what I do comes from him and the way he did things.
Gotcha. Kind
of like from the ground up. And I mean, later on in the story, there's a point where we're winning. And we're winning at the time on a top kart. But everybody at that time is on a top kart. Top kart was very big in that period.
We've heard about that, yeah.
And he says, I want to change the go-kart. Tony Kart, these guys over here at Tony Kart want to give us a kart to test. I go, okay, Tony Kart's good. I mean, it's one of the best.
How long have you guys been running at this point?
This is probably going into our last year.
Of juniors?
Yes, our last year of... So I worked with them the end of 02, 03, 04, 05. 3 years.
Gotcha.
So this is going into 05.
And he wants to change the go-kart. And you
Yeah.
guys have just started. You're winning. You're making.
Yes.
You've got things figured out on this top kart.
The story goes like this. The first year we met, we're kind of getting everything worked out. He's getting to know me. I'm getting to know the whole situation. There wasn't a whole lot of pressure. We're just going out doing these little club races. It's a big getting to understand what I have the ability to do, what I can buy, how much, what the budget is. Once I start to realize, so that was the first year, okay? We start going to some bigger races, getting to the front of the pack, right? The end of 03, we're starting, not winning, but we're going to get there. Like
You're in the
04
conversation.
is looking promising.
Yeah.
So what does the kid do? He breaks his leg
Yeah.
on a skateboard.
I would have guessed dirt bike.
That would have been ironic.
Yeah.
Man.
Little Louie breaks his leg. So I'm kind of in a panic because I'm like, well,
Lost your driver.
I don't have a driver. Mm-hmm. I mean, what do I do? So Louis says, hey, this was like over the Christmas holiday stuff, like over that time, karting, that little period. He goes, hey, come over to the office in January or at some point. We're going to figure out what to do. So I go over there and he goes, listen, the kid broke his leg. He goes, I'm not the dad that's going to rush him back in the go-kart. I go, he's going to heal and he's going to heal properly. If it takes 6 months, whenever the doctor says it's okay, that's when it's okay. I'm not going to put any pressure because I don't want it to affect him later on in life.
Nice.
And I said, okay, well, that means what does that mean? He goes, well, the doctor said, X amount of months. And I'm like, okay. He goes, so here's what we're going to do. You're going to race. And Louis is going to come.
Have you done any racing during this period of time?
No.
So you just hit the off switch. You went
Yes.
straight from racing and kind of trading and going to school. I assume you finished school and all this other kind of stuff in this period of
Well,
time. But
yes.
You're not racing. You're just working and running the team, and boom.
Right. Besides getting in a cart with him and
Coaching.
driving and
Yeah.
coaching, but no racing.
Wow.
So he says, hey, you're going to get in the race. You're going to get in the cart, and you're going to run our schedule. Because when Louis comes back, I don't want to skip a beat.
Okay.
You're going to continue to develop your engines. You're going to continue to work on the go-karts.
Smart.
So that when Louis comes back, you get out of the seat and he gets in the seat and we go. Breaking his leg was super for me because I tell guys this, I'm on salary, I'm health insurance, I got and I'm racing. Entries, everything.
Paid to race.
It's like
Getting paid to race.
a race car driver without the race car, but a go-kart.
Yes.
That's awesome.
And my job at the shop was, man, I need to go test. I need to get back in shape. So a lot of it at the beginning was just going to the track, and I'm getting paid to go practice and get in shape and learn and work. And so then I get back into the races, and Louis had to come and watch. That was the deal.
Part of his rehab, if you will.
Yeah. And it sucked for him
punishment.
because all the kids would say, hey, what did you do? Make fun of him.
Oh,
He's
man.
in crutches. The kid's sitting there. One of the actually best thing, I don't want to say it was a good thing, but when he came back, man, he
had a fire, huh?
I'll tell you something that actually helps my son, and we can go into it later, but some of what I realized was taking Louis to the track and him watching his competitors race, and it's something that a lot of kids nowadays don't experience. My son got to experience that because I started taking him early to the pro kart races, and he would get to watch the same kids he raced here race, and it would bug him. You know, it would make him, I felt like it made him stronger and more, you know, it would drive him.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times he would win a club race here, and we would say, hey, you know, the next race is, you know, Buttonwillow, or even it could have been here. And he goes, Dad, I can race, I can win. I go, you're not ready. Plus, I'm not going to spend that kind of money. Plus, I'm working. And he would have to come. I go, you don't have to come. He goes, no, I want to come watch. So he would come watch and watch his buddies, you know, and to him, he's like, they think they're fast. You know, and I don't know what's going on in his little mind, but he must be thinking like, I could win.
I could be out there, yeah.
You know, and I'm like, next, you know, the kids don't get that nowadays. And I think it's been a big part of Jesus's growth. And I think it was a big part of Louis' growth when he had to sit out those races and watch. Mm-hmm. And just like, and when he came back, I mean, from that point on, we were pretty unstoppable.
When he was coming back, he's like, I'm starting to feel pretty good. You're like, hey, sure? Maybe
That's
you need
right.
a few more months off,
That's
buddy.
right. That's right, because when he came back, I was out.
Right.
He's like, hang up the suit. And I had no problem. I mean,
That
I'm
was the
getting
deal.
paid. I'm
Yeah.
getting, I'm.
It was a bonus.
Oh, it was a big bonus.
How'd you do back in the seat?
I got after it.
Yeah?
I mean, I was a bit rusty.
You're still doing Yamahas?
Well, yes. The interesting part was, the tricky part was, when you're teaching somebody, you're Mr., you know, mean, you got to put your foot down. You need to make that pass. You need to make this happen. And now,
Louis over here like, what's up?
now it's like, uh-oh, I have to drive.
Yeah, lead by example.
Exactly, like all those things I said. And so that was a big driving force. And then when he got back into it, we start winning.
That's
Start
awesome.
winning. But no, I learned a lot from Luis, the way he ran it. I tell this to a lot of my parents because it's a lot of how I teach Jesus, my son. When we, in 2004, he had told us, if we don't win a regional, we don't go to the nationals. We kind of all shook on it. And I said, that's fair. We'll be fine. We'll win the regional. We did everything that year but win. We led the last lap. We were on pole. We won heat races, but we didn't win a regional. The nationals came and they left. We didn't go.
Man.
And
Not
was
because
like,
you guys weren't ready, but because that was the deal.
right. And he was very hard on his son. I mean, he there were times where we were in points or racing, and I would have the whole thing was I'd have the trailer loaded. I'd have it out of the shop. The shop would be shut down. He would pick up his kid from school. He'd drive up to the trailer. We'd hook up. We'd go to the next race on a Friday or a Thursday. Mm-hmm. There were probably 4 occasions where I had everything ready, and he calls me up. And he goes, hey, Louis effed up on this class. We're not going.
Talking about school again.
Yeah. Louis decided that it'd be a good idea to talk back to mom. we're not going.
That's a good dad right
Yeah,
there.
I'm like, wow. What ends up happening is he also owns these race cars. He owns a Miata, and he owns this Honda Accord.
Oh, okay.
So when we don't go to the go-kart track, he goes, load up the big cars. We're going to go to Buttonwillow to race, to go play. So I'm like,
This Louis guy is helping you out big time.
you have no idea. No
If
idea.
he wasn't such a good kid, you'd get a lot more opportunities.
Yeah. No idea. I mean, we raced in Maui. Luis loved Maui. We ship go-karts to Maui. They have a state championship in December, and we go race in Maui.
Get out.
Wow.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
Wow.
04 comes. He starts winning. Now I'm getting really into the engine stuff. Louis really, I created this driver, from the ground up, and the engines are coming together. Everything's coming together. And actually, before the year ends, we got the state championships again in November, and they're at Moran Raceway. And for a period there, I got out of the kart. But you can imagine that the races are they start to be pretty boring for us because we show up so prepared. Now at this point, I have 30 to 40 hours every week to prepare everything. Could you imagine?
Right.
We were so prepared. I can make engine changes in under 5 minutes because everything I practiced at the shop. The tires were mounted, balanced. We had a practice go-kart just for practice. We didn't touch our race karts or race engines. Everything was super dialed, the pits, everything. So we would show up to a race. We'd go out and qualify P1, and we would sit and wait, go out in the heat race and dominate. The main would come, and we'd pack up. We'd go home.
And that was all the club stuff, or
club stuff, some Region 7 stuff.
Okay.
So it got a little boring. Luis invites me to come back. He goes, you need to bring your kart back. I enjoyed watching you race. So now I get back in the kart. Now we're running a 2-car team.
Were you on the OTKs? Did that switch ever happen?
No. So we were on the top karts. He says, you'll get to race, but Junior comes first. If at any point,
Right.
you're never going to leave him to go hit your race.
Right.
Only happened one time when I missed a heat race. He'd been an axle, and I had to change the axle, and my kart, there was no question. I just didn't go out in the heat race.
Is the first time one of his mistakes actually hurt you?
Yeah.
Exactly. So then going into the state championships at Moran, this is when the whole chassis thing starts. And Luis says to us, we want to go Tony Kart. It's a beautiful kart. I'm like,
Loves the color green.
my karting, when I raced, I always raced off brands because they were free.
Oh.
We would get these off brands to sponsor me, and we would sell them through the school.
Nice.
So I was never on a name brand kart. I ran a Red Baron. I ran a MS kart. These brands that you barely hear of, but they were because they were sponsored. You couldn't go at the time and go get a sponsorship from Tony Kart. They were already big.
Right.
So now I get the chance. I want to run the Tony Kart, man. This is like the steering wheels are soft. Everything about them.
Luxury.
Yes. We have a meeting because we would have a meeting every Wednesday afternoon at the shop. He says, I thought about this. He goes, the Tony Kart, it's already a 20-time world champion kart. I'm like, the kart's good. What are you going to prove? And I'm like, I don't like where he's going.
Oh,
Right.
Man.
He says, this kart over here, everybody, the top kart, everybody's on it. So you're winning on a kart everybody's winning on. What's the big deal? He brings out this Avanti, which is a kart that JM Racing, which JM was the big Tony Kart importer at the time. They bring over this Avanti, which is probably the original. It was Parolin made. It was a Parolin brand kart that was made, and he brings it over in the hopes of having more money in it, more room. But this kart, nobody's running it. So he says, I really like this Avanti. And we're like,
Yeah.
we're
Big
like,
time gulp.
okay. He goes, we're going to go this way. And I take a deep breath and
You went from having a solid program to a big what if statement.
Yeah.
So we went out. This is 2004 state championships. And
This is the first time you run the go-kart?
the first
wow.
race. We got
Oh,
them a
man.
week before. And we win.
Get out.
No
Yeah.
way.
He wins and I win.
It was all motor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
At Moran, yeah.
Yeah, actually, right.
And then we go into 2005, and I win a Region 7 championship. He wins 2 championships. We dominate. We win. We go, the IKF Nationals are in Moran. I win in Formula Y. I win in 4-hole can. He wins in 4-hole can, and he wins in the HPV class. So we get 4 Duffies.
Wow.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
4 for 4.
Yeah.
Get out.
Well, no, 4 for 6 because we run 6 classes.
Ah, okay.
That was 3 days. I won the first day. No, I take that back. No, I won the first day, but I don't want to get into it, but I made a questionable pass for the win,
Gotcha.
and they put me a spot back.
You had to. He was watching. Louis was watching. You had to do
The
something.
only thing I'll ask was who was the pass on, if you happen to remember.
It was a NorCal guy,
Uh-huh.
and so I don't remember his name, but there was always that rivalry from the north and the south guys.
I heard about
Yeah.
that back in the
you
day.
know, and so
one of the guys from up north.
at the
yeah.
Nationals, you know, the mentality is, and Troy is very right. You know, Troy is the one that coached me mentally, was really his big part in me. And at the Nationals, unfortunately, my mentality is you either win or you go home. I mean, there's no points to collect. You don't want a second place trophy. And so it's the time you go for it. You know, this is it. You want that Duffy. And that's what I did. I went for it. I made it. I won.
Yeah.
I try to challenge their decision and say, hey, he's the one that went off, not me. I go, he ran out of talent. But it was a pretty ballsy pass, and
Yeah.
that was that,
Yeah.
you know.
So you almost went for 3.
Yeah. So Formula Y was nice. It was direct drive, and then the 4-hole can, and then he won. So yeah, so we finished off that year.
That's 2005.
That's 2004.
Oh, that's 4.
No, I'm sorry. That's 2005.
So you you guys win on the Avantis out of the gate. Are you on the Avantis all the way through 5
Yes.
as well?
Yes.
And you cap out, because again, that's the state championships at the end of the year again, right?
Yes.
At Moran. So
Yes.
you've capped off 5 back-to-back, like, badass years.
Right.
Were you pretty confident with the 2005 program? With now you're racing a lot more and still taking care of the kid, or did you ever feel like you were not focused on your stuff as much as you'd like?
No, because there was plenty of time. I mean, we were so efficient at the shop. I mean, he's a restaurant business owner, so the shop was very well managed. He managed it like a restaurant.
Right.
And if you've ever been to a King Taco, I mean, it's great food. It's very well ran, and he ran the shop. He taught me how to run it the same way. I mean,
Nice.
it was
It's organized for sure.
very organized, very
Yeah.
clean, very efficient, you know. We start getting now to the end of 05. The kid is unstoppable. I mean, I feel like I wanted to do another year in senior ranks.
This is junior still?
He's
for
in
him?
junior, yeah.
Okay, so he would
I'm
have
in
moved
senior.
up to senior.
Right. I'm ready to hang it up. I've won. I'm 25 years old. I get married in 05.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so a little bit before that,
Done with school?
no, I never finished school.
Oh.
I become a junior mechanical engineer because if you fast forward a little bit, and I'll get there, going into 06, the kid wants to race cars.
Damn it.
Yeah. And I had done some truck racing, and there's a moment where he goes, if we can convince Louis to do these little speed trucks that we were running at Irwindale, he goes, I already have one truck that you're racing. We'll get another truck. We'll run 2 trucks. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
The kid looked down on NASCAR.
No.
He's like, no NASCAR. I want to go open wheel. You know, so I'm like, that was it.
Right.
Yeah.
So now we're left with, what do we do? So 3 options. Luis says, we put another driver in place, right? Louis out. We find someone else to fund this. Really, it was going to be his brother, but his brother was already so had his whole program and he was doing his own thing.
Okay.
They're like, no, I mean, they were doing fine, doing it their way. And
This was Raquel?
Raquel
Okay.
Martinez, yeah. And he had his shop that he was running with. He had everything figured out. So we try to get her to come over. That didn't happen. Second option is we close up the doors. You know,
That's it. Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
Good luck with your school. You know,
Ay, ay,
carry
ay.
on.
Obviously, that sounds like worst case.
The third one was let's open up as a business, because at the time we were beating the big shops. We were beating Pitts. We were beating the Wolchers. We were beating all of those guys, but I was contracted not to be able to do any outside work. I couldn't build.
The team was winning. It wasn't like it was the engine builder, or it was
Right.
the team. It was the
Right.
drivers. Yeah.
And guys would approach us and say, "Hey, who does your engines?"
I'm sorry. What was the team called, by the way?
We didn't really have. It was. We didn't really. Martinez Racing was our logo.
Yeah.
It was Martinez Racing, and it had. We'd have. The nice thing is he could leverage from his restaurants. Like we had Pepsi sponsors on the
Oh.
car. We had King Taco, obviously. We
Right.
had, so he ran it very much like a business.
Okay.
And so very professional. All the shirts, everything, super pro. And so now people are asking us, who builds your engines? Obviously, they start to know that I'm building them. They want some of that.
Sure.
Nobody could beat us at the time, mainly because I was building the engines at the time for literally 35 laps.
Oh.
There are things there you could build, like the CCs and certain things that we would go out and test and get them to where they were legal within 45 laps or 30 laps.
I remember that totally reminds me of NASCAR back in the day. They used to have qualifying engines.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
and
right.
it's good for 2 laps. They had like no oil in them for
Right.
Daytona or whatever, and then they're done.
That's
Yeah.
exactly what we could do, because I
okay.
was full time sitting at the shop, and I had to find ways to
You could experiment. Yeah.
experiment,
Right.
blow stuff up.
Yeah, I got all these engines for $4,000 over here lying
Cutting too
around.
far. And it was great because I said, hey, I need a lathe. Next week, a lathe would show up.
Oh wow!
We got to a point where I need a dyno. A dyno would show up. It was.
I don't like the color. We get a different one.
Yeah. No, it was great. And
The trust sounds like it's huge, though. And
the trust is huge.
Going
Yeah.
both ways. Like, you trusted him that he wasn't going to try to talk shit about you to the kid, and, well, vice versa. But he knew you can run the business, and if you
Well,
needed something, you needed it,
get the
right?
things
Yeah,
that you
he was
need.
a big part. So 2006, we open up the business. We are Position 1 Motorsports.
Okay.
Because
That I heard
one
about.
of the very last races we left, I left Tech. This is the story. I left Tech. This one kid, mechanic at the time, says, "Hey, Jesus." And I look back and he goes, "P1, man, P1." Right? Like we got P1. So I'm like, P1. So on that way home from Vegas, we start to throw out different names, our initials, combined. And then I said, P1. And that kind of stuck. Luis turns it into Position 1 Motorsports. Our shirts used to say on the back, "Where do you want to be?" ? Position 1. And so 2006, Louis goes into car racing. He goes into Formula Renault. Very, 1600, then eventually goes 2-liter. I'm still in the same shop. I'm still his employee. It's his business. He opens up Position 1 Motorsports. I work for him. Now I have to go to the tracks and say, "Hey, I'm open for business. Give me your engine. I can work on them."
So is this engine only shop, not a
Yes.
race team?
Engine only.
Aha.
So now I start coming to the club races. Everybody knows me. So I start calling people like, "Just so you know, if you know anybody that needs work, I'm doing it." So I start building these connections, start getting some work. The first year goes okay. We didn't, we're just getting into it. Luis comes in. He would always do a monthly meeting with me. How much we spent, how much we invoiced, so on. At the end of the year, getting close to the end of the year, he says, "Hey, the business can do well. This is really good for the first year." Meanwhile, I'm like, I have no idea.
So you're not hands-on in the books department?
No.
Okay, got it. You're
At
running
all.
the show, but he's handling the back end.
That's it. He's got a
Okay.
girl in the front office that's
Okay.
doing work for him and also for the shop, and
Gotcha.
I have no idea. I mean, like, I'm just getting customers, building them. I learned how to kind of figure out what I could charge and so on and so on.
And he comes back going, hey, this is actually rolling pretty good.
Yeah, he goes, look, man, you're bringing in X amount of dollars for the first year. This is pretty good for a business. Like, boom, look into next year. And
did you get a big influx of motors coming your way right away, or was it kind of slowly but surely people started sending you stuff?
It was slowly, and it couldn't have been any better timing. If you remember 2006, 2007, the housing, everything
and
went
then
down.
8 was junk, right? 7 and 8, 6
But
and 7
meanwhile,
and 8.
I'm starting from scratch. The businesses that got really affected were the ones that were big in early 2000. They're booming. And obviously, I'm seeing that. I'm like, man, these guys are selling a bunch of engines. They're like a lot of business here.
Right.
And I'm like, I think I can do this. And so because the economy crashed at that time, it didn't hurt me at all. Because I started from nothing. I didn't have this big year and then this year I'm like 50% down.
Right.
I grew every year from the year I started. And so at the end of 2006, he basically says, hey, you know what? He goes, you're doing it, man. He goes, what do you think about taking it over? I go, what do you mean? He goes, he's like, besides some, the girl up front and you're using my bank account, like, I don't really have anything to do with it. So I'm like, again, a big gulp. And he says, I'll help you out. Like, I'm not just going to say, hey, here's a business, see you later. So he helped me. That's where now P1 Engines comes, because I only wanted to be engines. So I said, okay, P1 Engines. He helps me get incorporated. He helps me get everything set up properly. And then 2007, he says, it's all yours. We came up, I rented from him. The first year I rented all his equipment. I would pay him X amount of dollars every month to be able to use the shop as it is. Mm-hmm. And he goes, once you get into it, then we'll start to come up with numbers and you can start buying everything from me little by little. So I'm like, okay. So it's pretty scary because 2006, my daughter's born, October 2006. I have a newborn. We had bought our house, and it's like, it's
and now
scary.
You're a business owner.
Yeah.
It's all on you.
And it's scary. At the same time, it's exciting. I'm going to be a senior at Cal Poly Pomona, and it's too much.
It's a lot going on.
It's mechanical engineering is no joke.
Yeah.
A lot of studying. I was never really a school kid, as you remember, but I was doing it. And I put it on hold because I had this opportunity in front of me. And I was really at a point in school where I was like, there's always that thing, like, does everybody need to go to school? It's like, also the engineers, I kind of knew what they were making. You had friends graduating, and I'm like, it doesn't seem like I was kind of already almost making that.
And doing what you like to do.
Yeah, and so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to pause that. I can always go back, but I cannot come back to this opportunity.
Yeah. And the wife's on board with the whole thing?
Yeah.
All good?
Yes.
That's got to be big, though.
Yes.
I mean, to make that, hey, we're going to go all in on this, not do that. Got the munchkin.
Yes.
Ay.
Yeah.
So she'd already been around since, I'm guessing, the start of that whole program.
Yeah, I met my wife in high school.
Okay, yeah.
So she's been through it. She's kind of knowing the traveling. It became harder down the road as then Junior comes a year and a half later. Mm-hmm. Now we have 2 kids in diapers. It's the whole, P1 is new. I mean, it's
late nights.
Oh yeah,
Lots of work.
You learn. You have to learn. You have to adjust. It's a lot of different things, and we took it on in 2007, and we haven't looked back since.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
that's crazy. Like that. So at this point now, it's P1 engines at 2000. At this point it's P1 engines 2007. You're rolling. You got a couple of munchkins.
Yeah.
And it's game on. Let's, if you don't mind, I want to ask a few more things about some of the things that went around, because we skipped straight through, going back to when you were racing. I mean, before doing the shop stuff, and before you hung the helmet up and then put it back on.
Sure.
When you were that teenager and you're racing, what was the thought? Like, you enjoyed it, right? But did you have a goal? Did you go, hey, man, I could become a race car driver. I could go do this, or was there something in karting that you wanted to go do and achieve? Because you're working at Adams and you're going racing, and it's still the 90s, still the late 90s now. And what was the goal? Did you have a goal, or was it?
No, I mean, a lot of things happened through that time. Number one, I grew up in a very small house. My dad's making $30,000 a year. And so all of this is super new to me. Going around to the track, and that's what people don't understand a lot of times with me growing up. I didn't know that there was a possibility. It's kind of like, I don't want to get into the whole thing, but growing up, I just felt like this is going to be my life. I'm going to get some sort of labor job. I'm going to work hard like my dad, and this is it. You know, like, you see the people, to me, it was like the smart people. And I felt like the way I was growing up, there was really no chance for me to be a part of that. You know, it's a strange thing, but as a kid, that's how I thought. Coming to the go-kart track and seeing the money and getting to know the people and realizing, like, these are regular people like me, but they make a lot of money, was a big eye-opener for me. I mean, as dumb or, as simple as it may sound, that was just my thinking. So, no, at the beginning, I didn't have, I knew that racing took money and all these things, and I was just kind of taking every opportunity as it came and just trying to go with it, But at some point later on, yeah, I mean, as I got to drive and start winning races, I felt like, yeah, I want to get into some race car stuff. And
how did that start happening? How did you go from
Troy
karts to, yeah?
Troy was, we can get money and go race these trucks, We do this is funny because we did back in like I can't remember if it was the end of 96 or end of 97. He flies me to North Carolina. I'd never been on a plane. I'm 16, 17 years old. I've never been on a plane because they mess with me on the way there. Like, oh, the plane's and I'm freaking out. I've never been. I'm like, what's happening here?
Yeah.
But there was a diversity. There was a team looking for having a diversity driver.
Okay.
So it was like Troy, myself being Hispanic, and they're looking for guys like us. They want to have a driver in North Carolina. They got some funding. So we go back there. And I've never driven a car. I mean, Troy, he had me drive a legend car to get ready to go around a circle track. He's like, you're going to be just fine. And, man, I drove this car around the track. They had the restrictor on it, and they kind of critique us. And
what was the car?
It was just like a late model.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that was really my first taste of a car.
Remember what track it was?
It was a small track like in Concord.
Okay.
It was really run down, but, it was not, come to find out that most of the tracks are like that.
Yeah.
It's it was like a D shape, not very long, but there was a couple of the drivers there and they interview us and, I'm just.
Man, and this is, you said 96, 97?
I think it's the end of 97. So I had already been kind of like a year and a half. Yeah.
What a freaking fast track.
You're kind of along for the ride on that one, though.
Yeah. So that was my first taste of a real car. And
how'd it go? How'd the whole...
It went good. I mean, I didn't crash it. I think they were following up. They were more interested in Troy because he was older and Troy could talk. I'm just a young kid at the time. I mean, you're talking about moving down there. He kind of knew it wasn't going to be for me, but it was an opportunity to go drive a car.
And he's bringing you along.
Yeah, so
that's awesome.
We did it, and again, just experiences. Later on, with Luis, we start doing. How did this happen? So we start racing.
Well, I'm sorry, real quick. Did you end up going the truck racing deal then? When you guys came back from that, did you end up doing any?
We did, yes. So then we got some money to do a speed truck. We did some racing, but it. That's a whole nother level. You know, we try to do it kind of like karting.
Yeah.
And it's like that stuff needs a lot of work, man.
Cameron Jocelyn said the same thing. He said because they went and did speed trucks. His Taylor Jocelyn and the whole
That's
thing.
right.
And they did the same. They tried to do the same thing with the karting budget,
Just with the family too.
And like there was times like, you know, we're not buying tires because we're not going to run up front. Like we're not going to get any more, like that kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, I would think that if you try to just do the same thing at that level when the minimum amount needed to be spent is your maximum,
Sure.
that's going to make it pretty
Well,
tough.
you learn that in the go-kart in the old days, it was slower, harder tire. You can have a go-kart that wasn't set up right, and you can drive the wheels off of it and make it work. In a race car, you cannot. I mean, at that level, you're driving around this big boat, and if it doesn't turn, you can't pitch the thing sideways. You can't, you know, it's you got the wall. I mean, you're trying to carry speed. I mean, it's not like a go-kart. I always tell guys, you're strapped into the seat and you're just moving levers. It's not like in a go-kart where you're 50% of the weight. And moving your body could change the way the
manipulate
go-kart
it a lot, yeah.
In a truck, I mean, nothing. You're just turning a wheel.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't handle, it's scary.
Yeah.
You know, so we later went on. We did some Miata racing. He owned a Honda Accord fully race trim.
This is Martinez you're talking about. Okay.
The two brothers, and they would share the cars. And I got a chance one year to go to Laguna Seca. And we raced around there, man, and it was like beautiful, you know. And he could see that I liked the racing part, and I was pretty good at it. He puts me in a Jim Russell runoffs up in Sonoma, and these 60 go-karters or people, mostly go-karters. The runoffs are they give out 3 prizes. The first place gets a full year for free. Second year gets half the season. Third place gets, I think, like a third of the season. And they do this whole thing where they critique you, they interview you, they get to know you. You're there for, I think, 3 or 4 days, if I remember right.
Casey Cook just did something like that. Was it
the Lucas Oil shootout?
It was Lucas Oil shootout, but it was something very, very similar where he was there for 2. It was at Sebring,
right?
That he did it. What you said this was Martinez, so you would have been. This is after 2002 then, right?
This is like...
Or is this before you started the shop thing?
This is, I think, in around... It's kind of blurry, but it was 05, maybe even 06.
Oh, right at the end.
Yeah.
Oh, and so, wow, so
I
you'd
think
already...
it was 06.
So you just got done kicking ass in the kart with the championships and like that, and you get a chance to go do this shootout deal.
We do the shootout. I have no idea how I'm doing. I'm driving. I'm an instructor. Beginning, right? So then they're trying to instruct you. So I get it. I'm playing the whole, I know what a good student looks like.
Yeah.
So that helped. I
You're
also
saying the right things to you
I'm
at that
saying,
time?
I'm listening. There's a couple times that I'm doing my own thing, and they would question me, and I would explain it to them, and they would just say, okay. But you have no idea. It's like it's pretty neat. And then they cut it down to like 20. They cut it down like every day.
Okay.
And so far,
Kind of a
I made it to
knockout
the
deal.
last day, And at the end, I had no idea, and they called me for second place, man. So I get half the season for free. And because of that, Luis put up the other half. So I get to race the whole season. But that's where I start to get the taste of this whole kind of race car thing where it has a lot to do more than me. Karting it was me. Like, I could do it. I could build the engine. I could go to the track and practice. I don't need to rely on anybody. But when you start getting into the car stuff, it becomes so much not about you.
It's a team.
Yeah, and then this whole thing about that car's faster, and there's a lot of times where if you ended up with a bad car, I mean, there was nothing you could do.
You're stuck, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, it was just kind of, at the end, I got frustrated. And I remember... Again, it's kind of blurry, but then I just felt like the racing. I always looked at it where karting is 80% driving, 20%, everything else. And in cars, it's flipped over. It's 80% everything else, 20% driving, small. I mean, I used to have because of the King Taco, we used to have the truck out there, and I'd have to go do autographs, a lot of the publicity stuff. It's gotta be worth for them to give you the money.
Right. Return on investment.
one thing I liked, you go to high school and talk to the kids and tell them my story, where I came from, and you can make something of yourself. That was neat, but it's time consuming. You're not making money doing that.
Right.
So you're really racing, and you're racing broke. You're not. Yeah, you get to a point where you're racing a $40,000 car, and you come home to nothing.
Right.
And it's like, where does this go?
Kind of goes back to what you were saying early days with Troy, where you're like, okay, I'm doing racing, but I kind of need to make a couple of bucks.
Yeah.
I enjoy the racing,
right?
But
you're getting older. I mean, I'm 25. I'm like, it's like life's, it's got
it ain't stopping.
To start, man. And I'm like, if I go down the route of racing, I mean, it's a scary thought that you don't have anything, to fall back on.
Right.
And so the whole business thing, taking that opportunity, and I just like, I'm hanging it up. I'm going to make this work. I'm going to make some money. I bought my house. I'm doing it.
Do you think you and doing that Russell deal and finishing the way you did, et cetera, do you think that also had to, because you were talking about little Louie deciding he wanted to do single-seaters instead of NASCAR. Do you think that might have had anything to do with it too, seeing what you did and him going that direction instead maybe?
It might have. I think it had a lot to do with, at the time, there were other drivers, other of his buddies that were going that route.
Okay, yeah.
So it was like, I mean, it's just the timing, because he later comes back and does NASCAR.
Oh, no way.
Now I got P1 up and running, and he's doing, he's racing at Irwindale, and I look at him, I'm like,
damn it.
Yeah.
And so that was that, and, just keep going.
How did so you do the single seater stuff? You did some of the truck stuff. You said you got a chance to go do the Lagudin deal and the Accord and whatnot. That's in your mid-20s. Have you ever thought about getting back into a car, or maybe getting your own Miata, or maybe going and playing around or like that, doing some more car racing?
No. I mean, me and Morgan talk about this all the time, because we're at the shop, and he's at the point. I remember the days that I had that look on my face like he does when his race is coming up. It's like, oh, you can't wait. That's all you're thinking about. You can't sleep. And I drove so much, and I tell this to my parents now also. I go, you're going to burn your kid out. I did it so much that I got to a point where, I'm not going to say I hated it, but I was kind of mad at it, because through the years, looking back, it saved me. It kept me out of trouble. It kept me, it kept me doing something. But at the same time, like I didn't go to any parties. It was karting. I mean, from the time I was 15, I mean, that was my girlfriend. Like, if there was are you coming to the dance? I'm like, no, there's a race tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm like, and at one point, I realized, like, man, I didn't really get to be that kid or that teenager like my other friends that were out kind of getting into trouble. I was over here, so
you missed out on some things.
You got to be a balance. I try to do that even now with my son. Like I was telling you, it's you want to be, they got to be kids, you want to take it serious, but yeah, you got to be careful.
Yeah.
Because I tried to get back out there. I've driven. I raced the 206 race. It's fun. I like that the best, because I was able to show up. It didn't beat up my body.
Right.
I could go to work Monday. Big deal. And but the truth is, I don't have the enjoyment as I remember.
Yeah.
I think the biggest problem is that in those days, I didn't pay for anything. So now that what runs through my mind is, I don't want to mess up my graphics. I don't want to mess up my nose cone and all those. I don't want to get hurt. I have to go to work.
Right.
I have all these things that people rely on me, and so I can't race comfortably.
Right.
And so when you weigh it out, it's not worth it for me. And what's really helped is the fact that I build engines for these young kids, and now even my son, I race through my son.
Right.
Yeah.
So I get that enjoyment of me winning a race or getting ready for a race comes through that now. So
right. So the actual behind the wheel stuff. Again, at the end of the day, I know exactly what you mean. When you have to pay for everything yourself or whatever, you're like, Yeah, I mean, I guess I could, and I would probably have a good time. But man, I could really use this instead for the house or for this or whatever it is. There's that.
Yeah.
But if you have a way to scratch the itch anyway, like you said, with Junior going out there and making things happen, or your customers for that matter, whatever it may be. Yeah, I guess maybe it's not such a driving force, especially if you don't have that need to go wheel to wheel or do something.
Yeah, because I'm still competing. My engines are competing. My son's competing. It's not like I'm sitting at the shop just building engines.
Yeah.
You know, so that gets my itch.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you want at some point, you get out in the arrive drive, come out and play with us.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have to worry about scratching anything up with those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good time. So, yeah, I mean, you get a chance to do some different car stuff and whatnot. I mean, I guess we were just talking about, I was going to ask, what about karts? But you kind of answered that a little bit. But, I mean, sounds like you'd be a badass Masters driver if you decided to go out there and make things happen.
I'd like to think so. I told Morgan the last couple times I drove, when I drove, I was pretty aggressive. I felt like I drove with the passion, my heart. I just gave it all, my all. You know, coming from nothing and then having the opportunity to race. It's a tool I even use with my son, and I tell some of these kids, some of the parents nowadays, I say, you know, these kids nowadays race with no, how do I put it, consequences in a way. When I raced, I had to make an amazing pass. I had to win. I had to do something to show my sponsors that they're going to pay for my next race, because the next race was not the next race. It was in question. Like, I would do a race. I didn't know if I was racing next month, right? So I had to do something today to show them that they want to see me come race the next month, whether it's to stay in the points challenge, to stay in whatever it is. And so that drove me. Nowadays, kids don't have that drive, because if little Johnny finishes last, they go to the next race.
Right.
You know, so it's like, no, you have to do something, right? And my son knows it. I go, buddy, we're not going here if you don't do this. He had a chance to go to the Nationals this year in Indy. Mm-hmm. He had to win both days at Santa Maria. He got lucky and won one day and got third the second day. It's just like Mr. Martinez taught me. We're not going.
Yeah.
You have a shot, but if you're not winning both days here, we have no business going down there.
That reminds me of, I think it was last year. Towards the end of the season at Pro Kart, they do the giveaways and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
It might have been in the middle of the year. It might have been Monterey or whatever. But I remember they pull out Junior's name for something. I can't remember what it was. But it was like a free ticket, or it was something.
It was a Pro Kart race here.
Yeah, and
ticket for entry at Indy.
That's what it was. That's what exactly. And it was, well, ask your dad if you guys can make it. And I hear you from the back. We're gonna be there. Yeah, we'll be there for sure. Is that? How do you do that now with him? I mean, with all the stuff that you've done throughout the years and how you brought up, you're talking about you got to win both days. Is that a deal that you make with him at the beginning of the weekend, or how does that work out for his progression? Because I hit pause real quick on the answer. I actually remember you telling me in his progression, because I asked about him moving up from cadets to junior one time, and you're like, no, we can stay right here in cadets. We still got more that we can learn. We still got more that we can do right here. As you say, he can do what he wants to do. It's not like it's forced upon him. So how do you work that out with him, and what kind of conversations do you have as far as his work through the progression?
Well, you've heard from my history and working with different kids, and you know, being an instructor, and even my own experiences. I remember learning karting. So it's just a lot of different techniques. One of the hardest things I have to do with Jesus is I have to kind of do a Mr. Miyagi with him, because if I get any other kid and I tell him to do something, he looks up at me and he's like, okay, got it. But when you try to tell your son that, they're like, you're dad.
Yeah.
Get out of here. So one of the challenges is doing a Mr. Miyagi. In other words, teaching him things without him knowing that I'm teaching him things. And so it's been fun, you know, and it's been challenging, and it's been all those things. But just I just teach him how I remember learning, you
Yeah.
know, and it's from being just very basic to what I try to do with him is not skip steps. I tell parents nowadays that they try to go too fast. They get into karting, the kid gets a top 3, they're going to the nationals.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, well, wait a minute.
Still a club race,
You know,
bro.
even when you win a club race, you know, did you really win it or did you get kind of lucky?
Right.
You know, because, you know, such and such didn't show up, your kid won. Now, you know, we're going to the Super Nats.
Yeah.
And
You gotta be real with yourself.
I take
Yeah.
it, this is what I tell my parents all the time. When I loved math. This is the reason I went to mechanical engineering. And there's plenty of parents that know that I've told this to. And it's when I always wanted to get to calculus, to the big boy classes. And I was in such a rush to get there that when I got there, I realized that calculus wasn't that hard. But what held me back was not knowing algebra, how I needed to know it.
Oh.
So when I look at my son's racing is when I take him to a big race, I don't want to deal with club level issues. So let's get rid of these club level issues before we jump up to the next click. Now, I've not always been that way with him. Sometimes we do races for fun, for experiences. But generally, my thought process is teach him from the ground up, right? And just those are the conversations we have. And, you know, he'll say, I want to go race this. And I'm like, you're not ready. You know, prove to me, you know, do this. And, you know, of course he fights me and, you know, and it's like, there's different ways there. Troy has gotten involved with him a little bit. You know, that's kind of like his coach sometimes when I need Troy. As I help Truly, you know, we kind of pull each other and help each other. It's been fun. I mean, and with him, it's just, yeah, he'll say, I think I can win in Indy. I go, okay, well, win at Santa Maria. You know, that's it. You know, don't. Of course, if I had the money, the time, we would be there.
Yeah.
Sure.
But Luis always taught me they had the money and the time, and he would set restrictions. And that went a long way down the road.
Just because he can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah, and at the end, his kid was unstoppable. I mean, we were winning, and people were racing for second. And that's always been my goal. My goal with Jesus is always to show up, and you're racing for second.
Be the ones, like, people are looking at the entry list or whatever and be like, ah, shit.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's not going to happen at the National until it happens here, until it happens at Tri-C, until it happens at LAKC. Then it'll happen at Pro Kart. Then when we're ready, we'll go to the big boy league. And again, it comes down to him. I mean, if he wants to do it and he's, you know, we started running, you know, along to get myself back into shape a little bit. And then he started doing neck exercises. You know, this last month, he mentioned his neck was hurting at the X30 is a big jump. And I said, hey, you know, there's a whole thing there. There's a whole thing there that I coach him, talk to him. The biggest thing is, here's what I tell him. You got a fast engine. You got a fast go-kart. You're driving the line. You're consistent. You know, you make a pass. I go, but this guy's doing the same thing. He's got a fast engine, a fast go-kart. How are you going to beat them? Because there's 10 other guys that have everything I just listed that you have. And so getting into that more of like having him think, okay, how are you better? We're not going to beat these guys with engine or chassis or because you're going in deeper. That guy's going in just as deep. He's getting on the gas at the same spot. You know, so how do you beat him? You got to understand how the go-kart works, right? You got to understand how the engine works. You got to understand how the tire works. You got to understand how your body works. All these things so that when you're out there, you can adapt and go.
Does he spend any time with you in the shop?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah.
Get a P2 engines for anything he builds?
At the moment, he disassembles all my new engines. So if we get a run of new engines, he comes in, he disassembles them. He gets $10 an engine.
Nice.
That's cool.
And he loves it. He comes in. And I've always told him, my hopes are not for him to take over the business and stay in karting. My dreams for him are to be able to do whatever he wants to do. But he's going to know how to work on stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have a big problem with what's going on nowadays and the social media and the kids and the generation and I'm trying to keep him right.
Yeah.
You know, he's going to know how to do tools, and not that that's the way I want him to go, but it's going to be better for him to know, you know.
Yeah.
It goes a long way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it more than knowing how to do it for knowledge sake, it builds a lot of character.
Oh, for sure.
Know?
Yeah.
So,
I know growing up, my dad, he's mechanically inclined, works with his hands. He's been doing it since forever. My brother took to it, construction, all kinds of stuff, welder.
Yeah.
I hate that stuff. I hate it with a passion. However, I always say that I know just enough to get into trouble.
Yeah.
Like if the car's making a noise or something like that, I'm like, God damn it, I know what that is.
Yeah.
And so because my dad always taught my brother and I, we know how to use certain things, and I was interested in a little bit construction, mechanics or machining. So I know that stuff. I just don't like it. So whereas my brother loves it, but it did instill in me like being able to make things and do things with your hands and stuff like that. And to Derek, your point, it builds character to know that kind of stuff and not be helpless.
Right.
Yeah.
When something like that happens. So regardless if someone decides to become a designer or something like that, or drafting or something that has absolutely nothing to do with working with their hands in that regard. Well, when the faucet breaks, they don't have to call a plumber. They can probably figure it out themselves.
Well, not get taken advantage of and
Sure.
things like that. Yeah, I mean, and it's a confidence thing. You know, he's a little bit shy, and so we're constantly working on, the karting has helped with that, his confidence. He's getting around. He's talking a little bit more, you know, his buddy. He's not very open, as you guys know, right? But like I tell him, it's a tool now, because this is kind of intimidating, you know, when someone comes and talks to you and you just stare out in space, you know. And it's you know, but I go, you know, but the confidence thing is him, like I say, how many of your guys you're driving know how to take their own engine apart? You know?
Sure.
And so rebuild a carburetor. He knows how to rebuild a carburetor.
He knows more than I do.
And so I say, hey, it's just think about it. You know, when you're sitting on the grid, and those are the things that I feel are doing more than the same things they're doing. That's going to benefit him down the road. That's always been my teaching. My teaching is always to him from the very beginning. It's down the road, down the road. Not today, down the road. This is going to be very helpful for you down the road.
Nice.
Yeah, that's pretty damn cool. What with going back to the P1 stuff, I mean, you got this thing rolling in 2007, right? And obviously it's 2020, so it's been around a bit here. How have things progressed? And you had mentioned earlier, right, the crash happening right then and there, right? And while it didn't affect you so much because you were just getting rolling, how is because I know absolutely nothing about the engine programs or anything like that, how have you seen engines change over the years, and how have you adapted the business accordingly? Because, I mean, I started racing two-strokes for the first time, and it was tags, and we're running Motoris and Leopards and all kinds of different things. And now it's kind of tightened up to just a few different things. How have you tried to adapt things, and have you always done certain engines or all of them?
We generally have stuck to whatever is the mainstream on the engine side. At that one time, it was Yamahas, and it was kind of transitioning to HPVs, which was the newer 100cc. Then the tag stuff came out. The tag stuff was a bit of a disaster at the beginning. I didn't get involved right away, as it kind of got a little sorted out.
Was it because of the water cool, by any chance? I mean, would that have anything to do with it?
It had to do with basically a lot of different makes, if you remember, the whole combining. It was popular at the bigger races, which I wasn't quite there yet. I started mainly, you know, your Tri-Cs, your SoCals, Region 7 was kind of crashing at the time. So what happened was I get in the door, I start building engines, we start doing IKF Region 7. It's going downhill. I mean, we're making money, we're growing as a business, but karting is coming down.
Got it.
And what happened is, it's another long story, but I had a few customers that decide they're going to go to WK on the East Coast and race. And they want me to come, right? I said, okay. They're getting mega entries over there. They were getting, 60 karts in a class.
Wow.
We're over here.
This
We're
is the Man Cup, I think.
The
right?
Man Cup.
Yeah.
And we're starting to see, days of like 60 entries. And so the first race we go to, WKA Charlotte. I'm there with him, a few other. I mean, I have 3 engines out there, and I know nobody.
Wow.
This is the whole other side of karting. I'm like, I've never seen any of these people, but the 3 people I know.
Yeah.
And it was pretty interesting because it's like there's a whole other world over here, and it's huge. I mean, the Yamaha stuff, competitive as can be. For some reason, the economy didn't catch up to them as quickly as us, like in California, because they were still getting a lot of entries. So what happens is 2008, 2009, I start traveling. I'm going to Florida. I'm going to North Carolina, Indiana. And that's a bit interesting because, again, if you go back to my story, I mean, I grew up, I only knew miles from my house.
Right.
And so now
get there on your bike and that's about it.
I'm going to Indiana and I've never experienced this. I'm like, this is different. I mean, the people are different. I mean, the way they cut their hair. I mean, we laugh about it. They talk different, And I remember being at the racetrack and thinking, man, these people are odd. And I realized, like, I'm the odd one because I'm the only one here. All the
odd man out.
Yeah, and so, but no, you meet great people. You start to really make great connections, and that's where the business starts taking off because I start meeting these different individuals. I mean, they're so intertwined. And
you're talking about when you went there the first time, it was with you only had 3 engines out there, just a couple of people. Are you now going to these other places with them still, or is this on your own accord to build the biz? Or
No, so originally I'm going with them. Like, they're at one time, like, they're flying me. And then I'm kind of being a mechanic because I know that background to kind of make it worthwhile, right? So I'm taking up maybe they're running 2 classes. I'll run 1 car. You meet Wesley Boswell that's running the other car. You make, these are some of the great people in karting. You start to make connections. You're rooming with them. You're having dinner with them. You're starting to learn, meet. All of this is going on. I'm starting to go to the East Coast 3 times a month.
Wow. Because that's where the karting is at that time.
That's where the karting is, and it was very difficult because I have 2 kids in diapers. The wife is going a bit crazy. It's hard. I mean, you're having to fly. I'm having to do red eyes Thursday night, so I'm spending more time at home. I'm having to do late night flights Sunday night, right from the track. You're talking 100 degrees, 100% humidity, right to the airport, right home.
Yeah. Back
at the shop Monday. The logistics of shipping engines, and that's just where the business was. And eventually California starts to come back. Pro Kart starts growing. I start having enough business here. I grew to having about 20 to 25 drivers on the East Coast. And so that was pretty big because each of them have, 2, 3 engines. I have like my own little station back there. It became challenging, but it made me better as an engine builder. I've always said that because when you raced on the West Coast, you had Fleming, you had Pitts, True Tech, you had your engine builders out here, and I would have to compete against them. You went to the East Coast, you had Comet, you had Wolcher, Atkins. It was a different set of builders and different set of rules. And I was at the one point, my advertising was I was the only engine builder winning championships on both coasts at that time. Winning here, going back there and winning. And it became pretty challenging, being gone from home. Luckily, things changed. Karting over here started to grow, and I started to realize, like, well, I don't need to start. I need to not go back there as much because it's hard.
Yeah.
Right.
I had to do it at the time to keep the business going, but you realize it's a big expense, on time and everything else.
Every flight, every trip or whatever, especially if it goes out of your pocket instead of supplementing that with mechanicking or what have you.
Well, that and your sanity. I mean, you start to get burned out pretty quickly.
Yeah, and so I noticed that every time I go to an East Coast race, maybe even Florida, engines would do well. Started to build a name for myself back there. Like I met the engine builders. It's like I'm somebody. I'm not this just guy going back there with one engine. It was tough. I mean, those guys are tough. They don't want that outsider coming in, and so it was tough. I got in there, and you start to realize that it's a challenge because you don't have all your tools there. It's like they have a little bit of an advantage. So again, I go back to that just because it made me a better engine builder. It just made me stronger. To do it that way.
Getting outside of your comfort zone, getting outside of your own backyard, trying something else. It's not like you can just run down to Charlotte and test.
Right.
You got to hand it off, and somebody else is doing the testing.
You deal with the humidity.
Right.
We don't have that. I mean, the temperatures.
Everything's different. So you got a chance to kind of go outside of your own box here, go learn some other things, and then I assume we were able to bring some of that back home.
Well, what I was getting at is I noticed that when I come back home, I get a few calls from club guys that say, hey, we saw your engines out here doing well. We want to try something different. And so then I pick up a little business in Florida. Then I go over here and I pick up a little business. And then it got to a point where I had my West Coast guys racing, I had my East Coast guys racing, and then I had guys just all over the country that were just starting to use me as their builder. And I started, it's like a whole nother thing. And yeah, the business has gone, it's gone through its changes. So what happened was at that time, I wanted to be the engine builder. My mindset was I want to be number one. I want to be the name. I want to be P1. I want everybody on P1. I want to be the top dog. What you realize is that I realize that I don't want to be that guy because no one's happy. It's a nightmare. Mm-hmm. It's a nightmare. You're starting to deal with these big teams. You're starting to deal with a lot of headaches. To keep it there was very challenging. I got to a point where I had a guy full-time. I was full-time. My wife is in the shop full-time doing paperwork. We're thinking about hiring a third guy. And it just was too much. Stress level. I wasn't enjoying it. There was really a point in time where I wanted to stop. I did not enjoy going to the track. And
the thing that you loved is now turning into the thing you hate.
I hated it. I mean, me and my wife had many talks about me doing something else.
And we've heard that kind of thing before, right? When you have to rely on something as what puts the food on the table, it can turn something that you enjoy the hell out of into dread.
Yeah.
You have to be careful. What happened was there's some really bad people, right? So as I'm growing the company, I would get these clients that I felt that I wanted because their kids were good, but these dudes are, they're terrible people. I mean, they're rude. They don't want to pay you. I mean, it's like, those were the things that I didn't like. It was just like so cutthroat.
It sucks because those people stand out.
Yeah. I'm also, we talked a little bit about it earlier. You're at the Nationals. They put an engine on. It goes a tenth faster. You're out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, after everything I've done for you, man, like you went a tenth faster because your kid, got
the corner right or whatever.
And it's like a tenth, really? But meanwhile, I see it happen the other way around too. I realize that sometimes they put my engine on and they go faster by a tenth or whatever it may be.
And
sometimes they go the same time and they're like, your engine just felt better. and they leave their current engine builder in the dust, and I'm like, good for me, but at the same time, I'm like, wow.
You've been there. You know what that's like.
I'm like, that's not cool. Like, so you end up in this place where you're just not happy going to the track because you're getting chewed up. You're getting, it's. I was in a bad place, and I allowed it to get there. Eventually, I stood my ground, and I start. What I realized was I don't want a regular job.
That's weird.
Yeah, I don't want I'm a good worker. I could be, I enjoyed working for Mr. Martinez, for Luis, and it's just like there's good money in this sport, and I always said, there's got to be a way for me to do this and be happy, so I started telling people to take their engine somewhere else when they were rude, when they were disrespectful. I can understand when customers are unhappy that the engine isn't running, they're having issues, but just, hey, I'm here to help. But don't be that guy that comes to the trailer and throws the engine in the trailer and says, here's your pile of,
here's your piece of crap back.
Yeah, here's your piece of crap. And I'm like, oh man, like he's not happy, and it weighs on you.
Yeah, for sure.
Because meanwhile, you think you're working hard for them, you put a lot of effort in the engine. The kid had a bad weekend. He's like, here's your crappy engine back,
Yeah.
A lot of different texts. I mean, I can go all into it, how these dudes, and it just weighed on me. I'd get home, I'd be depressed. I didn't want to play with my kids, and I'm like, this is
follows
terrible.
You for sure.
Oh yeah. I mean, so then I'm like,
and then you're going to go back on into the shop on Monday and somehow do it again.
Right. And they're calling you, and they're like, it's like, so I went back to working by myself.
How long ago was this?
This was probably somewhere in 14 or 15, 2014,
Not that long ago.
2015. No.
Wow.
I was pretty big. I was spread out. I was going East Coast. I was building a lot of engines for the big teams, and the big teams are ruthless. They're chewing you down on your pricing. And I felt like I wasn't in control. And so I said, you know what? I started kicking, I get it. I get that racing, the parents, because I'm a dad, the emotions, they're tough, but there's some parents that just lose their mind, and it's like, they don't pay me enough to deal with that. And so I just said, bye. I don't, here are your engines. Where do you want me to ship them? I'm not building them anymore, and just kind of starting helping back to like Tri-C, the guys that are having fun, true story. The reason Morgan works for me, when I met Morgan, as you guys have met Morgan, he's so upbeat.
Yeah.
And he was getting a karting, and I remember he's out here practicing. He loses the chain, and he's like, oh man, my chain. And he was so pumped to be out on the racetrack. I gave the guy a chain. I go, don't go home, man. Like, here's a chain. And he's so thankful, so happy. And I just loved his spirit. I'm like, you're what it's about, man. Like,
he's out of the pickup. It was just him. He would just leave the cart on the ground all day and just go drive.
And to me, this is what I miss. I miss Morgan. If I can get more, I didn't even think of him as a client at the time, but I said, this is the client I want right here. The guy that's going to be out here giving it all and
happy to be here.
Happy to be here.
Yeah.
Having a blast. He can have the worst day. Like he tells me, the worst day at the go-kart track is still a good day.
Yeah.
And it's like,
it's the right attitude.
And I had lost sight of that. And I'm trying to make all these dudes happy. And I realized that no matter how much time or what kind of engine I give them, they're not going to be happy.
Yeah.
It didn't matter what I did. And so a lot of different stories there. They're examples of like, I'm so out. It's not even in my control.
Yeah.
So I just kind of hit the reset button, and came back more locally, and kind of really said I'm gonna build the business from the ground up again, and just start little, and start supporting Tri-C, LAKC more. The national stuff, I don't really see too much anymore.
You don't try to pursue it too often?
It's unfortunately, for my kind of business, what I learned, it's a hard business there.
Well, the margins are tight, right?
Yeah.
As you say, I mean, the big teams, where everybody's pretty brutal or whatnot because they're looking for thousands.
Yes.
And, well, they'll go anywhere to find said thousands.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's so much more going on to it, and they look. That's what I explain to people all the time. I go, when you go to a national, you're spending 10, 15 grand. I go, how much of that is your engine budget? But how come when you're not performing, what's the biggest percentage? They always look to the engine like 60, 50% of the problem, sometimes more, because their driver can't do anything wrong. The chassis is the best.
Yeah.
I go, so when you're slow, what's the percentage? 80% engine? I go, how come our budget isn't 80% on the engines? You know, and that's the way I look at it. When you come back to Tri-C and you start looking at the numbers, it makes more sense for my kind of business to be here, because the percentage that they're spending on the engine is much larger than what they're spending on the overall picture. How much does it come to do a Tri-C race? Set of tires, entry, it's $300.
Some fuel, yeah.
If you're out of the back of the pickup, it's
Right.
sub $400.
Right. So now, your engine is a big percentage of that,
Right.
and that's why I'm here to help.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then being local too. You're just down the road here
Right.
in Rancho, right?
Yes. It's 10, 15 minutes from the track.
Nice.
Yeah, so you're able to really be able to support everybody and whatnot. And kind of speaking of that support, out of curiosity, at a height, how many engines
I was about to ask, yeah.
did you have out there? Up on the chip, getting after it. How many did you have out there? And
I wish I knew. So part of the problem of a lot of karting businesses, we do it initially as a hobby. See, when I took on P1, I had that competitive edge. I wanted to win.
Right.
I wanted to win. I wanted everybody to, and what you don't realize is you're not running a business,
right,
and so I couldn't tell you because I'm so concentrating on winning.
right, results.
I'm just in the shop, and now I'm more business. I'm more about P1 being successful as a business, having that service, just creating that experience for the client. But even till now, I don't really look at the numbers. I mean, we're busy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're busy. We're at a point where we're actually shortly. I mean, I've been talking about it, but it's going to happen. Is we're actually going to be controlling it. We're actually going to be putting a cap. We're actually going to be putting out a release, basically saying that we're not. I've actually been doing it already. I'm not really. A lot of times, there are some people I turn away, and it's not because. It's just because I want to be more about the quality than the quantity, and that's the truth. In the past, I was more about the quantity than the quality, and it got out of control.
Right.
And I have really good clients right now that are having fun. That is, it's keeping me and Morgan busy. I mean, we're working full time, and I can't take on. I'm really at that line where I can't.
Any more would be overwhelming, and right now it's comfortable.
There are times that there are times we do 12 to 14-hour days, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I get it. In karting, the scheduling is tough.
Sure.
There's like 3-4 races back to back, sometimes on top of each other. Even this weekend, you have the Sonoma race and you have Tri-C.
Right.
We just came back from LAKC, and then we have Pro Kart. So they're busy days, but we want to be able to give that quality and that attention. I want to have time to come out and do this. I want to have time to talk to the client on the phone, explain to them what a good, the different options they might have, just give them that quality time. And I can't do that if I'm doing 10 more engines a week. I can't do it.
And as you said, keep, as Derek mentioned earlier, the sanity. You still have the family and everybody to hang out with and be able to go home. And,
Right.
And then maybe the kid wants to go practice or whatever, or he'd go racing.
My biggest fear is a customer saying I don't have time for them.
Yep.
That's what I don't want to happen.
Yeah.
And I constantly tell my customers, no, I'm here, man. We talked about it. I go, whatever I can help with, give me a call. I'm busy, but let's set up a time. Let's go out to the track and test. Let's, take advantage of those things that, but I don't want to get to a point where I was in the past where it's like, you can't even answer the phone.
Right.
or send an email, or it's like, no.
Yeah. Well, for those people who already are customers and maybe prospective ones in the future, how would they get a hold of you then? If do you have a website or whatnot?
Yeah, we have a website. Nowadays it's Instagram. P1
Okay.
Engines. You can look up P1 Engines on Instagram, Facebook, the website. Yeah, I mean that's. You used to advertise in Go Racing magazine.
Right.
That used to be a
Yeah.
pretty neat thing. I tell people, on the way to Indiana, I took a stack of magazines, and so Morgan go through them, and it was kind of cool to see some history in that. But
Yeah.
nowadays, Instagram, people, they message me there a lot. So I'm pretty hands on with it. So I message them back, and there are guys that have reached out of the East Coast that have a team and say, hey, we have X amount of engines, and I've turned them down. I've said I don't have. I can't. It's too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you wouldn't be able to support them in the right way over there. Yeah.
Exactly. And that it's going to be a more official announcement, but basically we're going to play it. Hey, obviously that could change. I mean, 2-3 months down the road.
Yeah.
Say, hey, we but it's we're getting to that point.
Yeah.
We have enough work, and we want to keep it right.
Well, it's a good
I like
problem to
that.
have. Good problem to have.
Yeah.
Being open, being busy enough, not
Yeah.
too busy.
And
That's
putting
good.
out a good product.
For
Yeah.
sure. Well, Jesus, this has been a freaking blast.
Yeah.
This has been so much damn fun.
Thank you.
The quiet guys at the track usually have the best stories, and this was an awesome one.
I loved it. I loved every minute. I loved hearing all the stuff from. I mean, yet again, another person from Adams. We've had so many people on the show from Adams, and we're gonna get
That was the
Mr.
original, man.
Troy on here
We're
soon.
gonna get Troy on here. So yeah, God, I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah.
God dang. But this one was a blast. Thanks again for coming out here
You got it, man.
and hanging out with
Yeah,
us. And
it's a good time.
we appreciate it.
Great.